Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending where you're located. This is Jonathan at Mnemonic. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're just going to give everybody a few more minutes to join the call. There's still some people logging on and what have you. So if you want to grab a cup of water, a glass of water, or coffee or something, please go ahead and we will get started in just a couple minutes to talk about how to build your business case for comprehensive centralized compliance. So please go ahead and grab a glass of water and we'll start in just a couple minutes. Okay, great. So just a couple administrative notes before we get started. The webinar is being recorded and we'll share a copy of this recording with everybody. You should get it tomorrow through an email alert. We'll also share a copy of the slides as well as supporting documentation. During the webinar, please ask questions. So there's a questions panel in the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar system. So you can pop in your questions there and I'll try and address them as we go through the webinar. But certainly we can also address them towards the end of the webinar. And then we have one poll that we'll kick the webinar off with, but after that, the agenda will be presenting a little bit of an overview of Mnemonic, how we think about compliance, and then we're going to go into an actual exercise of building your own business case for compliance. So there are some handouts. In the right-hand side, there's a section of the right-hand side of GoToWebinar, there's a section called handouts. And in there, you'll see some slides. Those are just general slides about Mnemonic, but there are two Word documents. One is a business case template, and the other one is a completed business case template. So the business case template is the file that we're going to walk through and discuss, and then everybody will be able to sort of personalize it and make it their own, and potentially use it internally at your organizations to build the business case for proactive compliance approach. And then the completed business case template is just what it sounds like. It's one that was completed for a sample company a few years ago, and so it gives you a sense of what a finished one might look like. But of course, every business case will be different based on the situation of the companies involved. So that is a little bit the overview of the plan today. It should probably take half an hour, 45 minutes, so plenty of time for questions. And again, recording and slides and everything will be shared with everybody. So why don't we just do a quick poll to start off the webinar. And the question is, what methods do you use to manage your compliance obligations? So what are you using to stay on top of all the things that your organization needs to do to be in compliance with laws, regulations, standards, internal documents, policies, procedures? There's a lot of stuff out there, of course. So how is your organization currently doing this? And so you can collect multiple responses. This poll, you can select 1, 2, 3, 4, and let's just wait for the responses to come in. Give us a sense of who's on the call and what they're currently using to manage compliance obligations. So you can name it as requirements. It's another way of calling obligations. Not exactly the same thing, but pretty close. So let's give everybody a couple more minutes or a few more seconds to answer the poll here. And then we will dive into the presentation and then the actual building of the business case. All right, so just another 10 seconds or so, and then I'll close the poll. All right, so I will close this poll and I'll share the results with everybody. So it looks like 88% of folks are still using pen, paper, files, and folders. I shouldn't laugh. It's a serious matter, but not terribly surprising. Over 50% are using Excel sheets. And then there's a small percentage that are using some sort of EHS software tool. 25% are using Mnemonic apps. So it's great to see that we have some customers on the call today. So long story short, it looks like there's still a lot of opportunity to streamline some of your compliance programs. So let me hide this poll, and I'm gonna share my screen now, and hopefully the presentation should pop up. So what we're gonna do, let me make this full screen. So what we're going to do is go through a short presentation. Should last about 5 minutes. It'll last a little bit longer than that. It'll last about 15 to 20 minutes, the whole presentation. And then we're going to go into those Word documents, and I'll walk you through the template and help everybody understand how they can potentially fill out this business case for their own operations. So here we go, building your business case for a centralized, comprehensive compliance program. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I think everybody understands that's what we're trying to do. So just a little bit about Mnemonic. For those of you who maybe don't know us very well, we were established in 2008. We service over 450 customers around the world in pretty much every industry one could imagine. And we're really grateful that these customers have put their trust in us to help them manage their compliance programs. So what is Mnemonic is not, I think this is just as important as what Mnemonic is. So Mnemonic is not a EHS management software. If you're looking for a full-fledged EHS management software, that's not what we do. We don't have training and incidents and all that other stuff. We don't just give you content, and we're not just another audit tool. So really what Mnemonic is we're an integrated compliance solution, ideally for mid-sized organizations. The really big companies typically want some fancy customized software, and the smaller firms might not have the maturity yet to put in place a robust system like Mnemonic. But we try to be a turnkey solution for compliance. And today's not at all the sales pitch, but I just wanted to highlight what Mnemonic is before we get into the presentation. So 2 sections today: why does compliance matter, and then the actual exercise of building your business case for centralized compliance. So at the end of the day, what we're trying to do at Mnemonic, and what we think all companies need to do, is move from this reactive side of compliance where you're reacting to incidents, you're reacting to government inspections, to auditors, to a proactive one where everybody knows what they need to do at all times. It's clear, it's well documented, and it's well understood. Because what we've seen over the years is that the vast majority of organizations do not know all of their compliance obligations. So this leads to surprises. You get an audit, an ISO auditor, or a corporate auditor, or an external auditor, they find stuff, and then now all of a sudden your next 2 months is closing out audit corrective action findings. And that's very disruptive to your business. A typical manufacturing facility from our data has about 3,000 compliance obligations and at least 200 new ones per year. So it's a very big challenge. And I think everybody will understand this. It's basic, lean manufacturing. We want to discover these problems, surprises, compliance issues as early as possible in the project phase. And I have a couple of examples later on to talk about, but you don't want to be discovering the compliance problem just as you're about to deliver a new product or a project. And we think all modern companies should be able to do this. They should be able to operate efficiently and satisfy their customers without violations, spills, product recalls, or worker injuries. And we do this with an approach called comprehensive compliance. We won't go into too much detail today, but basically what we recommend companies do is that they look across the various areas of compliance. And ideally, you do all your areas of compliance together in one system. Most organizations still have a very siloed approach. So the environment people deal with environmental compliance, and the safety people deal with safety compliance, and the HR people deal with HR compliance. But that creates a lot of challenges in terms of communication, reporting, budget management. So our recommendation, and we think there's a general trend in the industry, is to centralize all of this. But what we do is we look at the various areas of compliance, we look across the different sources of obligations, so regulatory standards, permits you've obtained from the government, contracts, stakeholder engagement, and then allow you to create actions and audits to do a spot check. And ultimately, that's it. Mnemonic is about identifying your obligations, both coming from regulators and your internal ones, coming from policies, procedures, contracts, actions you need to do to stay in compliance, and then audits to make sure everybody is up to speed and respecting their compliance obligations. So that's it. Building this business case is about convincing management that a proactive compliance program is a path to resilience. So by mapping everything out, having 360-degree coverage of all your obligations, you'll always be ready for an audit, and you can instead focus on performance improvements and ultimately increase the trust you have between yourself, your staff, your partners, your customers, and reduce risk and have less surprises. So that's a little bit of an overview of why compliance matters. Just a little bit of our philosophy and what we've seen over the last 14 years of working in this space. So the next section is really about building your business case for centralized compliance. And I just wanted to share a few examples of some data around why compliance, the challenge, the burden of managing compliance, and perhaps some of this will be helpful in building your own business cases. So from our data, we cover about 450,000 laws, regulations, and standards around the world. So we have a very large sample set of data. We have 40 countries, 400 jurisdictions, if you count states, provinces, and cities. And what we see across the board is, on average, 3% of laws, regulations, and standards are updated every year. So there's this constant update that's happening as the government's issues. So 1 year, one country may be more active than another, but if you average it out over these countries, 3% are changing every year. And that might not sound like a lot, but it is. And not only are things changing, 3% are changing every year, but your amount of obligations and regulations and standards that apply to you are growing. I mean, the government is issuing more things, requirements are being added to existing regulations. So there's just a general growth of the amount of regulations that are potentially applicable to you. And it's about 2% a year. Again, doesn't sound like a lot, but that's compounding, right? And so every year it's more and more and more. And if you don't put in place tools and systems to manage this, it can be really overwhelming. And so just a few bullet points that, again, you can feel free to use in your business cases. An average manufacturing facility has about 3,000 obligations in laws, regulations, and standards. Laws are changing all the time. It's often difficult to know what the intent of a law is, or like the interpretation. So there you need to make sure you have time and resources to analyze the requirements that are coming from government. Often they're in local languages. Regulations often depend on guidelines and supplementary material that you need to consult to really understand how the regulators are looking at a law or regulation. And lots of jurisdictions don't consolidate their laws or regulations, meaning they don't, when there's a change to the law or regulation, they just publish the change, but they don't incorporate that change into the original document. So that's an extra challenge for specific jurisdictions. And then not all regulations are, of course, available online or easy. So I'd say these are some of the challenges that companies face and that you can use in your business case. So yeah, a few other high-level numbers. As we saw today, most operations are still doing this manually. We have 75% here as our general data point, but I think today 88% of people said that they're still using pen, paper, Excel, and tools like that. Pretty much every country in the world is constantly issuing new environmental health safety regulations, and there's a lot of evidence that good, well-implemented software can reduce the burden of monitoring all these regulations. So I just have 2 or 3 examples of compliance issues that really cost a lot of money. And so you have seatbelt regulations in Brazil. This was a customer of ours that was building a new van, an automotive company, where they're building a new van in Brazil. And so they designed the van, they checked all the specifications against the local regulations, and then they went into production. But between the time that they had finalized the specifications and built all the production lines and done all the sourcing, and the time the van actually started coming off the production line, the regulations had changed in Brazil with regards to seatbelts. And what they had to do was basically, there was a whole number of these vans that had to be reworked. So anybody who's been trained in lean manufacturing will know that you really want to avoid rework or redoing work that's already been done. So they have to rework many vans in addition to changing their suppliers, changing the production line, and then about a 9-month delay in getting this van to market, which of course has a substantial cost. So this is just one example of where a failure to have this proactive compliance monitoring in place led to millions and millions of dollars of cost overruns. Another example from a customer was they built a new part of an underground mine, and they did not put in sufficient egresses or exits from that part of the mine. And basically when the regulator came by to inspect the expansion of this underground mine, they determined that they didn't have enough exits. Now, the company ended up coming to an agreement with the regulators, but the long story short is this failure to validate the compliance requirements around this specific part of the mine led to substantial cost overruns because building the exits afterwards was way more expensive than building them during the actual construction project, I should say. And so we compiled some more famous compliance disasters in a webinar that we did last year called the Not So Hidden Cost of Compliance. There's a link here. It's on our website on the webinars page. And we run through some recent, last 10-year massive compliance disasters. Lac Mégantic was a train that exploded in Quebec, killed about 45 people and destroyed the downtown of Lac Mégantic, which is a small town. Deepwater Horizon, Macondo, which is the well-known oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico. Volkswagen, Dieselgate, Carnival Cruise Lines had a number of substantial fines on environmental compliance. So the list is long. I mean, it's not hard to find evidence of compliance issues costing millions, hundreds of millions, or billions of dollars. Now, those are the most famous ones, but of course, I think everybody that works in compliance knows that you also have the not so famous ones, those day-to-day issues, surprises that pop up and that create serious disruption in your business. And that's what a compliance program is all about, avoiding. And I like to make the analogy to preventative maintenance. It's not something that is very exciting or it doesn't get a lot of attention, but ultimately that's what this is about. It's about avoiding problems before they happen. And so this is a link to a very funny video that I think I'll show you. It's about 2-3 minutes long, which I particularly enjoy, and I think it's a good way to get your management on board with a compliance program. It's by showing them this value. So they made a Hollywood style trailer of preventative maintenance. So if I click on this, I think it'll take me to the help page, the YouTube page here. And I hope the audio is working. So I'm not 100% sure if the audio will work through the GoToWebinar. So let me play it. And if the audio is not working, if someone could just please let me know through the question panel or the chat. There's a chat on the right-hand side. So let me play this video. And again, if the audio is not working, please just let me know in the chat and I'll stop it. And of course, everybody can go look at it on their own. Unfortunately, they're saying that the audio is not coming through. So what I will do is I'll just share the link here in the chat message, and I encourage everybody to take a look at this later. It's a very funny video, and I think it gets the point across. So have a look at that video later. You'll have a good laugh, hopefully, and feel free to share it widely. So before we get into the actual Word documents of the business cases, just a couple notes here. So, compliance is a bit of an abstract idea. It's something that is less physical, less tangible than, say, preventative maintenance, where a machine physically breaks down. So it's really critical that you take this abstract idea and you try and make it as concrete as possible. And that's what this business case is about. It's about helping you convert, the risk of compliance into numbers and disruption for the business. And some people get it, and some people struggle more with it. We've definitely seen this over the years. So we have this template. Please download them from the handout section of the GoToWebinar, and there's the completed one, which will give you a bit of an idea of just what it might look like. And the idea is that you're going to enter your own information and relevant industry data. So if you're operating in the automotive sector, you'll certainly want to go and find some examples of compliance issues in the automotive sector. If you're in the mining sector, likewise. And the idea is that this business case should help you identify the external and internal resources that are required to implement a solution, a compliance, proactive, centralized compliance solution. And of course, you want this business case to be as objective as possible. Mnemonic is providing you with a template. It is written a little bit from our point of view, but certainly we recommend that you kind of personalize it, make it your own, make it as objective as possible. And we've seen this business case have quite a bit of impact within organizations. It really helps solidify the argument for making this shift. So it's not quite the end. I'm going to go through the Word documents, but certainly if you have any questions or you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at this email address and phone number. And we're based here in Montreal with operations in Shanghai and partners in Paris. So let me bring up the Word document. So I'm going to start with just the template, and let me zoom in for you. So let me zoom in so it's a little bit easier to read. And again, everybody can open this up on their own end. So cover page, not very exciting, but basically you have this executive summary. And this section is about providing general information regarding the business, just a summary. I mean, I think hopefully everybody's familiar with what an executive summary should look like, but hopefully it's a summary of everything that will be in the business case itself. The next section is the business need. And this section should really describe the problem that you have, or the series of problems you have. So if you've had a number of compliance issues, fines, inspections, disruptions over the course of a few years, this is where you would want to highlight it. You want to highlight the need, but not necessarily exactly how you're going to solve it. So it's really what's the problem you're trying to deal with. And then this problem, the business problem, would be taking a look at those objective compliance issues that you have, but then describing how the business is currently handling compliance. So if you're doing Excel, Word, some software tools, consultants, this is where you might want to highlight what the company's currently doing, what they've been doing historically, and then other sort of relevant information. So we're talking here about, maybe there's a growth happening at your company. Maybe you're involved in acquiring new divisions. Maybe there's a change at the government level. So this is where you'll want to bring together, like, what is the objective business problem that you're facing. It can also include reporting and the time that's required to generate reports for staff. ESG, or environment, social, and governance issues are, of course, getting more and more press, and senior level management is getting more and more pressure to be able to report for environmental, social, and governance issues. So that might be a driver for your business problem. And then here are some areas where you can just fill in the number of updates on regulations that might affect you. Again, this is environment, health, safety, but you can change this to include any type of regulation or standards. And if you're looking for data on how much things are changing, Mnemonic can certainly provide that to you. So just send us an email with a bit the scope that you're looking at, and we can let you know how many changes have happened. And again, you can talk about what the company's currently doing in terms of audits, in terms of inspections, in terms of compliance, and the amount of resources that requires. So this section, business problem, is really describing what are you doing now, and what are some of the challenges involved. The next section is recommendations and outcomes. So this section's really describing about describing the recommendations that you're trying to make to the business and where you'd like the business to ultimately, the business or the public entity to ultimately get. At Mnemonic, we certainly recommend this centralized and comprehensive approach to compliance and being proactive. So identifying all your obligations so that there's no surprises. I mean, that's the outcome that we certainly recommend. And it's really critical here that you include how this project will benefit the business, right? Because at the end of the day, everybody needs to make choices about where they allocate their resources. So it's critical with that infrastructure video. It's all about all the accidents that you avoid. I mean, how are all the non-compliances that you avoid? You have to be able to quantify that to a certain extent and demonstrate that investing upfront a certain amount of resources and money is a very wise decision. And then a proposed approach, you want to highlight how the technology or the solution that you select will be implemented. If you're migrating from other systems, how will that migration be done? And you want to do this in a really structured approach. We've worked with customers over the years that did not have a robust plan for how they were going to implement Mnemonic in our case, and they got all excited. They said, well, let's just create the account and set everything up and go for it. But if you don't have a robust plan and it doesn't get, the software and the system don't get linked into your internal systems and people trained and a real buy-in, it doesn't get used. And if it doesn't get used, you don't get value. And if you don't get value, you're just wasting a lot of time. So it's really critical that you want to break out in as much detail as possible the proposed approach. And it's also really critical that you highlight the internal resources that you will need to implement this solution, because the vendor, whether it's Mnemonic or somebody else, does part of the work, but really on your end, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So you want to break that out in as much detail as possible. And here we have some very high level steps that we recommend, but certainly it can be a lot more sophisticated and complex than this. Project description. So here you'll want to discuss a little bit how it's going to be executed, how you're going to analyze different solutions. If you go through an RFP process, an RFI process, a pilot project, if you want to test different systems firsthand, get demos. So certainly you would want to outline how you're going to go about analyzing the options, and then what the outcome will look like after that. And then down here, goals and objectives. The idea is to take a little bit what you've outlined above and highlight the specific goals and objectives you have. And hopefully those should be aligned with the general business goals you have. So in our case, we've talked about timely and accurate data gathering, staff efficiency, reduced risk of non-compliance, and aligning practices with corporate policy. So often companies have a policy to ensure that all sites are compliant to all relevant regulations. I mean, most companies have some sort of policy like that. But in reality, how many companies actually have a robust system to assess and determine compliance in a real-time, ongoing basis? I would say it's far fewer companies have that. It's easy to write the policy. It's a heck of a lot harder to implement it and carry it forward through all of your operations. But it's a good argument that you can make to upper management for budget. Say, hey, you guys wrote this policy. I'm happy to do it for you, but I need this budget. I need this set of resources to actually implement it. So that's where aligning the practices with corporate policy comes from. And then project performance. I mean, certainly you want to measure the performance of this project, determine that the return on investment, if you will. And so here, there's some performance ideas. So reporting, how much time are you going to save reporting, reducing discrepancies, getting all your data into one place, and eliminate duplication of work. So if you can streamline things, if you can identify, things that perhaps would have been missed or compliance issues that would have arisen had the system not been in place, this is a good place to put it. And so think about the different resources, processes, and services that will be affected by this project, and then how would you measure success? That's really what this is about. And then down here, we just have a basic cost benefit analysis. So this is sort of the summary where you want to convince upper management that, hey, this is worth the money. And again, it's about taking this abstract idea of compliance and making it as concrete as possible. So you want to, there's obviously going to be a cost to purchase any sort of solution, the implementation. There's a cost for purchasing it, but then there's a cost, your internal cost of time and resources. And then you got to quantify as best you can the savings. So that could be reduced risk of non-compliance. It could be savings on time on report writing. It could be getting clarity to other parts of the business units or other business units. So really, this is about trying to quantify the cost as best you can. And I think management and everybody understands that this is an approximation. There's no, there's no magic. You're not going to be able to predict exactly how many non-compliances you would have had without the system, but you can make some sort of approximation. Or if you take the last 4 or 5 years of data and you say how many non-compliances came up during audits and how much time did that take you to resolve those issues, well, that's a cost. And I think that's something that you can justify. And then going forward, if you can reduce that by 10, 20, 30, 50%, that's a huge impact. I was recently speaking with an oil refinery in Europe, and they had been using and still are using external consultants to do audits. So they'll bring in auditors every year, every 2 years to do these large, complex audits, and they would always have findings. And they would bring in different auditors, and then different auditors would be highlighting different things, and then the government would come in and they'd find different things. And the problem is that a lot of companies use audits as their primary tool for compliance. And what happens is you have this whack-a-mole situation where one auditor is really strong on chemical management or waste management, so they find a lot of findings there, and one auditor is going to be really strong on like air emissions, and so you end up like you spend a year solving this and then a year solving that, and in the interim things are changing, the government's issuing new regulations, there's things happening, and so you're just constantly kind of running around trying to put out fires rather than taking this proactive approach of getting ahead of the curve, figuring out all your obligations, figuring out your non-compliances, and then reducing your surprises. So this is where you want to try and quantify the savings and the return on investment you'll make. And then certainly recommend highlighting alternatives, like there's business as usual. Any software that you think about purchasing, it's ultimately a decision to change the way you're doing things. The easiest thing is just keep doing what you're already doing. So whenever you're making this type of decision, it's about, okay, we're making a decision to change, and then you have multiple ways you could change, different software you could buy, different vendors you could work with, how much you do in-house versus how much you outsource. So you want to go through your alternatives and say, okay, keeping the current system in place, well, what are the reasons for not doing that? What's the reason we want to change? And then alternative options, so doing it in-house, hiring an IT company, some other hybrid. So again, depending what you're trying to achieve, you'll want to look at these alternatives and identify why you don't think they're the best way forward. And then lastly, just highlight who is going to need to approve this project, and try and get them on board. And of course, getting them on board early usually can be a really good sign. But if you come to them with a business case that's already fairly robust with numbers and data, I think it'll really help get upper management to allocate budget and resources to do this. So this is the template. Again, you can download it. You keep a copy and use it on your own. I'll show you a little bit what a completed one looks like. So we have this one here. Let me zoom in again for you. There we go. Zoom at 200%. All right, so I won't go through everything. It's the same sections as what we just covered, except this one's written a little while ago, 6 years ago, so a little bit out of date. But this one is fairly short. It's not a long 500-page document. I mean, it's a 5-pager. But here we're talking about a railway company, so a company that operates rail. They're in the US, they're in Canada, and they want to demonstrate that the company understands all of its EHS legal obligation, that it's up to date. So a very simple sort of business need that they have. Talks here about that they're presently relying on external companies, auditors, and some internal resources to manage all of this. And there's a new environmental management system that's coming into place, which is putting more burden on headquarters. And that, since this management has come into place, there's been 2,100 EHS regulatory changes where in the jurisdictions they operate in. And there's some problems around reporting and the manual collation of information. So this limited reporting is creating significant internal railway costs, costs for the company and external consulting services. So a recommendation is that the company get some sort of a software solution and database of regulations, and that people at the company will then be able to rapidly access the right information. So there's a proposed approach which is very simple, very high level. Of course, it could go into a lot more detail than this, but often just providing this already is a good step forward. Project descriptions is to replace their existing system with a phased implementation, a web-based system that allows them to see the regulations, understand them, conduct audits, and once the data has been imported, any changes would be sent to the appropriate people through the platform. And so goals and objectives, the goal is to have greater efficiency, reduce risk, and allow managers to focus on employee tasks and not spend so much time chasing around administrative things like reporting and collating data. And so that's broken out into a few key things here: timely, accurate data gathering, improve staff efficiency, reduce overhead costs, reduce risk of error. And risk of error is a big one for sure. And then how they were going to measure performance was through reporting, real-time data entry, real-time legal updates, figure out whether or not the business units are getting their updates on time and processing them, and then reviewing records of analysis to ensure that the business units are reviewing changes on an ongoing basis and that they're up to date. So a rough cost estimate was just breaking out the purchase price of the product, reduce the reliance of external consultants. So that's often an area where you can save some money, is by reducing the use of external consultants, reduce risk of error, and then just general improved performance, EHS performance. So you would want to try and quantify this as best you can based on your specific business and the costs that you have for these things. So you can go figure out how much you're spending on consultants, how much you're spending, how much these errors are costing you. That's where you would want to put it. And they looked at other solutions, which was outsourcing it, developing some software internally, or keeping the current system in place. And again, you'll want to personalize this based on the situation that you have. And lastly, the approval section. So these two documents hopefully are helpful for you. And I encourage you to just try and fill it out yourself. If you'd like any help from the team at Mnemonic or any data points in terms of number of regulations that have changed, please feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help you set it up. And again, we have data on the website. We have a new report coming out on environmental fines in Canada and China. So that'll be made available in the next couple of months, and those will include data points on how many fines, penalties, and sanctions have been applied in the last little while on environmental compliance. But we have lots of data, so feel free to reach out to us. So I think that is pretty much what I wanted to cover today. I just wanted to give everybody a quick overview of how to build this business case and provide you with the resources to do it on your end. And we're here to assist you if we can. But please let me know if anybody has any questions, or if you'd like me to go into any more detail on any of the elements of that business case, or any of the slides that we covered today. Okay, great. Well, again, don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, you'd like any data points. And also, there is, I believe, an exit survey when you exit this webinar. So any feedback you can provide or is greatly appreciated. We do look at it and try to improve our webinars going forward. We like to keep them short and sweet, and provide you with some resources. And definitely take a look at that YouTube video. I think you'll have a good laugh. It's one of my favorites. And if anything comes up, or if anybody would like some help building a business case for the organization, just send us an email. Or I think in the exit survey, you can request a follow-up with our staff that we will be happy to review. We'll be happy to review your situation and help you build a business case for your operations. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day, and we hope we can help you take a proactive approach to comprehensive compliance at your organization.